Tiravana Chari Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Ballabha Giri Badadadi Gopi Jana Ballabha Giri Badadadi Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Haribo 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 Goda Haribo Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajakachaja Stutarisata Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitili Rupa Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajakachaja Astotarisata Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ananda Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai.
Jai.
Prem Se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Go Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Navadip Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Mayapur Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Puri Nilachala Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Shri Radha Sarat Bihari Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan Ki Jai.
Jai.
Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jamuna Mai Ganga Mai Ki Jai.
Jai.
Town Veda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai.
Jai.
Sankirtan Jagna Ki Jai.
Jai.
Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai.
Jai.
Go Premanandi Hari
Hari
Hari.
Bo.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 2, text 23. Sattvam rajastama iti prakriter gunastair yukta para purusha eka ihasya datte stityadaye hari virinchi hareti samgya shreyamsi tatra kalu sattva tanor ninamshu sattvam rajastama iti prakriter gunastair Yukta para purusha eka ihasya date. Stiryadaye harivarinchi hareti samya. Shreyamsi tatra kalu sattva tanur nrinamshu. Sattvam rajastama iti prakriter gunastayar. Yukta para purusha eka ihasya date. Stiryadaye harivarinchi hareti samya. Sheyamsi tatra kalu sattva tanur nrinamshu. Someone else?
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Sattvam rajas tamas iti prakritir gunaster yuktah parah purusha eka ihastadatte sthiti adaye hariviranchi hareti sangya shreyasi tatra khalu sattva tanor narashu.
Sattvam rajastama iti prakritir gunastair yukta para purusha eka ihasya dhatte stityadaye harivarinchi hareti sanghya shreyangsi tatra kalu sattvatanor nrinamsyu.
Mataji's? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Who was it?
Sattvam rajastama iti prakritir gunastar yukta para purusha eka ihasya Shtityadaye hari virinchi harete samya Shrenam shi tatra kalushat vatanur nrinamshu.
Hare Krishna. Sattvam rajastvam iti prakirte gunastastar yukta parapursa eka ihasya ghate istatya ade hari biranchi haret sangyaha shriyansi tattva tano niram sayo. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Mataji's?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Go ahead. Mukund, go ahead.
Okay. Sattvam rajastama itir prakrite gunaster yukta para purusha eka ihasya date stitya adaya hari virinchi hareti samgna shreyamsi tatra khalu sattva tanornayam shyo. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Bhav Prabhu, you have to do? You want to do?
Sure, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
It's going to be hard to top that last reciting. So, Sattvam rajas tama iti prakritir gunaster yakta para parusha eka ihasya dihati siti adya hari varinchi harite samjanaha Shriyamsi tatra kula sattva tanar nirnam sayu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Bhakti Bhakti.
Sattvam rajas tama iti prakritir gunastair yukta para purusha eka ihasya dhate srityadi hari virinchi hareti samjna sheyamsi tatra kalo sattvatanur nrinamshu. Hare Krishna.
Haribo. Anyone else?
Sattvam rajastama iti prakrite gunaste yuktah parah purusa eka ihasya dhatte sthiti adaye hari virinchi hareti sanghya shreyamsi tatra khalu sattva tanonamshu. Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Hare Krishna. Sattvam rajastam iti prakrite gunastaye yuktaha paraha purusha ek ihasya dhate stitya adeya hari virinchi hareti samjaha shreyansi tatra khalu sattvatanor nindam seyuhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we'll do word for word. Sattvam, goodness, raja, passion, tamaha, the darkness of ignorance, iti, thus, prakrite, of the material nature, gunaha, qualities, tai, by them, yuktaha, associated with, para, transcendental, purusha, the personality, ekaha, one, iha asya, of this material world, date, accepts, titi adaye, for the matter of creation, maintenance and destruction, etc. Hari, Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, Virinchi, Brahma, Hara, Lord Shiva, iti, thus, samgyaha, different features, shreyamsi, ultimate benefit, tatra, therein, kalu, of course, sattva, goodness, tano, form, nrinam, of the human being, shu, derived. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The transcendental personality of Godhead is indirectly associated with the three modes of material nature, namely passion, goodness, and ignorance. And just for the material world's creation, maintenance, and destruction, he accepts the three qualitative forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Of these three, all human beings can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu, the form of the quality of goodness. Report. That Lord Shri Krishna, by his plenary parts, should be rendered devotional service, as explained above, is confirmed by this statement. Lord Shri Krishna and all his plenary parts are Vishnu Tattva, or the Lordship of Godhead. From Shri Krishna, the next manifestation is Baladev. From Baladev is Sankarshan. From Sankarshan is Narayan. From Narayan, there is the second Sankarshan, and from this Sankarshan, the Vishnu Purusha avatars. The Vishnu, or the deity of the quality of goodness in the material world, is the Purusha avatar known as Shirodakshai Vishnu, or Paramatma. Brahma is the deity of Rajas, passion, and Shiva of ignorance. They are the three departmental heads of the three qualities of this material world. Creation is made possible by Brahma's quality of passion and his endeavor. It is maintained by the goodness of Vishnu, and when it requires to be destroyed, Lord Shiva does it by the Tandavantritya. The materialist and the foolish human beings worship Brahma and Shiva, respectively. But the pure transcendentalists worship the form of goodness, Vishnu, in his various forms. Vishnu is manifested by his millions and billions of integrated forms and separated forms. The integrated forms are called Godhead, and the separated forms are called the living entities, or the jivas. Both the jivas and Godhead have their original spiritual forms. Jivas are sometimes subjected to the control of material energy. But the Vishnu forms are always controllers of this energy. When Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, appears in the material world, he comes to deliver the conditioned living beings who are under the material energy. Such living beings appear in the material world with intentions of being lords, and thus they become entrapped by the three modes of nature. As such, the living entities have to change their material coverings for undergoing different terms of imprisonment. The prison house of the material world is created by Brahma under the instruction of the personality of Godhead. And at the conclusion of a kalpa, the whole thing is destroyed by Shiva. But as far as maintenance of the prison house is concerned, it is done by Vishnu, as much as the state prison house is maintained by the state. Anyone, therefore, who wishes to get out of this prison house of material existence, which is full of miseries like repetition of birth, death, disease, and old age, must please Lord Vishnu for such a liberation. Lord Vishnu is worshipped by devotional service only. And if anyone has to continue prison life in the material world, he may ask for relative facilities for temporary relief from the different demigods like Shiva, Brahma, Indra, and Varuna. No demigod, however, can release the imprisoned living being from the conditioned life of material existence. This can be done only by Vishnu. Therefore, the ultimate benefit may be derived from Vishnu, the personality of Godhead. Om Agyanatimirandasya Jananjanan Salakaya Chakshu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamaya Tadate Swapadante Kam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Go Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this purport, and particularly the last part of this purport, Srila Prabhupada gives this beautiful analogy or an example, which I consider for me one of the perfect examples of how to explain the condition of this material world and our entanglement here. Srila Prabhupada says in one place that an analogy is good if it has many points of similarity. An analogy is good if it has many points of similarity. So this example of the jailhouse, the prison, is a perfect example of our condition in this material world. I've spoken several times recently about the prison that's there in Philadelphia. I believe when you're coming up Highway 95, heading toward downtown, on the right-hand side, there's this old prison, which I think is used as a historic site. It's not really a functioning prison, which is interesting. People in a historic site actually pay money to go and see these places. So can you imagine paying money to go see a prison like they do in Alcatraz? They pay money to go see that place. So that prison that you have there in Philadelphia, and I explained that it's made of stones, bars, which are metal, glass, and when it's functioning, it has electricity, it has everything that you find in the row houses that are just a few blocks down the street. You see the prison, and then down the street, there are the row houses where people live. And in Philadelphia, I noticed that many of the houses are made from stone. Like here in Georgia, most of the homes are just wood. But in Philly, there's so many stones. So the prison is made of stone, and the houses are made of stone. And the houses have glass, and some of them have bars. And then the prison has the same. So what is the difference? The difference is the purpose, the utilization of that place, the prison. It is confinement against your will. And no matter how you struggle to get out from that place, even if you break away, like prisoners escape sometimes, and generally they recapture them and bring them back if they don't kill them first. So you're not given the facility to leave that place, just like in the material world. We come to this material world, as Srila Prabhupada explains, to get some relative sense gratification, to try and be lords, to be the lords of all we survey. But the Lord has set up the material world in such a perfect way that between himself manifesting as Vishnu, and in fact, all the expansions are coming from him, Shiva, Brahma, and Srila Prabhupada mentions Varuna, they're all coming from Krishna, and they're all empowered to take care of certain aspects of this prison. And no matter how we struggle to get out from it, it is a perfect place of imprisonment. Why? Because it's Krishna's energy. We'll discuss that in a few minutes. Daiviyesha Gunamayi, Mama Maya Dharatiya. This is Krishna's energy. And how foolish we are trying to overcome Krishna's energy by our own capacities, which are limited. Just like, again, back to the prison house. And as I said, this is my favorite example. It is so impactful. I hate to use the word easy, but it's easy to explain to mundane people to get them to understand their condition of life. When you're trying to explain to people their condition of life, they're almost like can't hear it because they're thinking, I'm the enjoyer. But when you put it into context, sure, you have a relative amount of enjoyment, but you're confined. You cannot do everything you want to do. Suppose I just want to jump up and fly. Can't do it. Limited. I want to be in several places at once. Well, if you're a yogi, you can be in maybe 7 or 8 places at once, but that's it. It's limited. So in the prison house, after a certain period of time, due to conditioning, the prisoners start to forget that they're in prison. They actually create their own society. It's a fact. They create their own internal society, forgetting to some degree that they're being controlled by the government. Not only controlled by the government, but everything they need to exist within the time of their imprisonment is provided by the government. Om Purnam Adam Purnamidam. Krishna has provided everything in this material creation. Everything is perfect, is complete, and is there for the complete confinement of the living beings. But we start thinking, oh, I'm the enjoyer. So Bhagavad Gita explains this very nicely, how we are not the enjoyer. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha. Ahankara vimuratma kartahamiti manyate. And this is a very amazing verse, because when we start to get off track, even as devotees, think of this verse, Bhagavad Gita 3:27. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. So we think we're doing these things. It's like, I'm moving my hands. I think I'm doing it. So I asked someone the other day, how are you doing it? This is a devotee. I said, how are you doing that? And they looked at the hand and went, well, I willed it to move. I said, that's okay. But how about every aspect of the movement, every muscle, every nerve? Did you do that? And then they thought, no. Then who's doing it? So under illusion, even as devotees, we think ourselves to be the doer of activities, even our intelligence. We just read the other day, this intelligence is provided by Krishna. And sarvashachaham rishani visto matasmatir ganam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvar aham eva vedja vedanta krid vedavid eva cha. So from Krishna comes intelligence, remembrance, forgetfulness. We could also say, since forgetfulness is coming from Krishna, it is divine. So don't blame me if I forget something, okay? Because that's coming from Krishna. Yes. And it's meant for us to remember that. That is called samadhi, practical samadhi. And it's not easy, because the moment, almost instantaneously, when we start talking or explaining or thinking, we get caught up in our own concept of this is me, forgetting that Krishna is allowing us to speak. It's like Srila Sukadeva Goswami in the second canto. He says, I pray to my Lord, be pleased upon me to decorate my words. He's not depending on himself. My dear Lord, you be pleased upon me to decorate my words as I speak. So when Srila Prabhupada was arriving in America, and in his prayers, so humbly, he said, Lord, you have put these people in ignorance. Most of them are in ignorance and passion, forgetting you. And I'm simply praying that please make my words suitable for their understanding. Even though Srila Prabhupada was transcendentally situated, renowned transcendental Bhakti Yoga scholar, devotee of the Lord, he didn't have confidence in himself personally. He had confidence in his spiritual master, and he had confidence in the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this illusion, it always captures us. Why? Because it is divine energy of the Lord. Daiviyesha gunamayi mama maya dratyaya. Mam eva ye prapajante mayam etantarantite. This divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature. So just on that point, we talk about the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. And sometimes we speak about it in, I won't use the word derogatory, but negative terminology. Maya. We'll say, that's Maya. You're in Maya. This is Maya. That's Maya. But here he's saying, Daiviyesha gunamayi. This divine energy of mind consisting of these three modes of material nature. So we talk about Maya, that means goodness, passion, ignorance. It is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Some points that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport we can just briefly review and then discuss a little more. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has innumerable energies, and all these energies are divine. We have to really think about that. All the energies of the Lord. Parasya Shaktir Vividhaiva Shruyate Swabhaviki Jana Balakriyacha. All these energies of the Lord are divine. Just like, again, the perfect example of the jailhouse. The building is made of the same materials that the temple is made of. And Prabhupada always gave the example, especially in Los Angeles, about we have this nice building, but before it was a temple, it was something else, a church or whatever. Like here in Atlanta, we have a very simple temple. I know Navina Nirada was just recently here. Vishnu Gada used to live here. And it's just a big old house. But what you don't know is that it used to be a frat house for young boys and from not Georgia State, but Emory University. And when we moved in the basement of our temple, there was a big 8-foot long bar where they used to serve liquor and all those kinds of things. And the temple room used to be a practice hall for a rock and roll band. But then when we moved in and we transformed it into a temple, when Srila Prabhupada came there, before he entered the temple and he saw the buildings, he was saying, it's so beautiful, so nice, wonderful place. And he was so ecstatic when he came in the building. But prior to his coming, prior to us coming, it was used for material purposes. So what is the difference? The difference is utilization. And what does that mean? Consciousness. Consciousness. I know because I was one of the first devotees to live in those buildings when we first bought them. And, we just focused on pleasing Srila Prabhupada and bringing our Gaunitai deities into the building. We didn't look at or think about all the negativity that was associated with it. So it became transcendental, and it's still transcendental because devotees are using it for preaching and serving the deities. So that is the nature of this material world. It's just like that. It's utilization. How do we utilize this energy? First, we have to understand what it is. Daivyesha Gunamayi. It's divine. That's very hard to keep it in focus because we encounter, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, what is that? Matra sparsita konteyas tatosna sukha dukkada agama payano nityas tam tatiksha sabharata. Very instructive verse. Tam tatiksha sabharata. Learn to tolerate. Because things are winter, summer, all these things are coming. You cannot stop it. But it's all coming from Krishna. But learn to tolerate. What does that do for us? What is the practical, what's in it for me? If you learn to tolerate, then you can constantly focus on Krishna. Always think of Krishna. Always see Krishna behind everything. Always see Krishna in everything. I'm studying in another group of devotees about Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna's saying, I am the strength of the strong. I am the intelligence of people. I am the sun. I'm the light of them. I'm everything. All these things are me. But to keep that in focus requires what? It's like in our process of Bhakti Yoga, 9 processes of Bhakti Yoga. The first 3 are really connected. What are they? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. So with sufficient hearing, and from what we hear and what we learn, we try to share with others, then we start to remember. So if we hear consistently, every single day, not once in a week, not once every now and then, every day. Nasta Praisa Bhadresu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevya, Bhagavatu Timasloke, Bhakti Bhavati Naistaki, by regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam, and of course, rendering service to the pure devotees. So then it becomes locked in. It becomes second nature for us to be able to see through the veil of material nature and remember that it's divine. Remember it's a manifestation of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning of the purport, he explains the expansions of the Lord from Baladev to Sankarshan, and then eventually becoming Narayan or becoming Kshirodakshai Vishnu, Paramatma within the heart of every living being, within every atom. So the Lord has expanded himself in such a beautiful way. So the devotee, because of his or her constant hearing the glories of the Lord, especially from Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, they can keep everything in perspective. Again, back to the prison house example. The prisoners lose perspective on where they are, and they get involved in this kind of internal culture, which is very violent, so violent that people are being killed there, raped there, so many horrible things are going on. So they don't qualify to get early release. I was just hearing about the famous comedian Bill Cosby, who's in prison there in Pennsylvania. And just recently he was up for parole. So during the parole hearing, they check out your record to see if you've been a model prisoner. So he has a 10-year sentence, up for parole in 3 years. Unfortunately, he didn't follow all the requirements for the parole. So then he didn't get parole. Even though he's super famous and rich and beloved by everyone, still he had to follow those policies, which he didn't do. So in this material world, if we want to get out ahead of time, let's think about it like this: early parole. And what does that mean? We can become liberated in this lifetime, in this body, right now. Recently, we were hearing a lecture by Srila Prabhupada during our monthly festival, Srila Prabhupada Super Saturday. And he was in Australia. And someone asked him, how long does it take to become liberated? He says, in a second, 1 moment. Doesn't take long. You have to surrender to Krishna. Like it says in the Bhagavad Gita, another wonderful verse, 14:26, Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyai kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once, this confirms what Srila Prabhupada said, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So how long does it take? You know, I've been practicing, 48 years. I know Vishnu Gadar Prabhu has been practicing 50 years. How amazing that is, Vishnu Gadar Prabhu. 50 years. He joined in 1971, I believe. So that's amazing to me. We should have a nice celebration this year, Vishnu Gadar Prabhu's 50th anniversary within ISKCON. So how is it possible to continue with enthusiasm? Because Krishna's blessed such devotees. And he's allowed such devotees to transcend to some degree these modes of material nature and come to the level of Brahman, so they can think constantly, put everything in perspective, keep everything in perspective, that this is Krishna's energy. When troubles come to a devotee, difficulties come to a devotee, he or she remembers that this is caused by Krishna. Going back to Bhagavad Gita, Matra Sparsha Konteya, that verse. You know, he remembers that this is being arranged by Krishna, and I must learn to tolerate. Not toleration for the sake of toleration, just like people who play sports. They tolerate all kinds of inconveniences to become Olympic athletes or professional football players. They tolerate. I always say, when I was in high school, my 2 brothers were very famous high school football players in my hometown. So everyone expected me to play football. So I went out for football for maybe 2 days, but I could not tolerate the getting knocked around and, you know, pushed around. And then the coach was making it more difficult for me. So I said, I can't do this. I can't tolerate this. So some people leave Krishna consciousness because they can't tolerate Krishna's arranging through material nature to test them. All of us are being tested constantly by Krishna through his material energy, because it's his energy, divine energy, and it's all working according to his plan. It's like working in sequentially by Krishna's arrangement. But we forget that. So I love in Bhagavad Gita chapter 12, the devotional service chapter, texts 13 and 14 in the purport. And I was actually showing this to my son yesterday, because he was you know, sometimes you have to fight with your kids and try to correct them and maintain them. So he's fighting with my granddaughter and trying to get her in the right track. So I said, Benny, because he has the Bhagavad Gita right in his little desk. I said, Benny, I want you to read this. So I took down the Bhagavad Gita and I went to that chapter 12, text 13 and 14. So I had my son read that. And he was like ready to chastise his daughter, correct her, until he was reading what Srila Prabhupada said. A devotee does not become his enemy's enemy. He thinks that whatever's happening to me, and I was putting it into context because he felt, you know, his daughter's not listening to him and she's causing, you know, so much anxiety. So, but when he saw what Srila Prabhupada said, a devotee, pure devotee, actually, he says, he thinks that whatever happens to me is by the arrangement of the Lord. And then he thinks it's due to my past misdeeds. And I deserve even more. And my son was just thrown aback. I mean, he's been around the movement as long as I've been around the movement, but not as active. But when he heard those words from Srila Prabhupada, I saw his whole demeanor just calm down, thinking, whatever's happening to me, this interaction, is due to what I've done to someone in the past. And actually, I deserve even worse. We know the example, like Srila Prabhupada would say, you cut your finger, but due to your karma, you know, by the grace of the Lord has been minimized. You could have cut off your hand. By the grace of the Lord, he minimizes for the devotee. But in order to profit from this, we have to remember. That's why these verses are so important. They're not just, we learn verses, we can repeat them, we can memorize them. We have to learn how to apply them in order to sustain ourselves. As I gave the example of Vishnu Guru for so many years, sustaining enthusiasm for devotional service. How is that? Well, he just likes prasadam. Well, that's also good, you know, take prasadam like anything. But by knowing this philosophy in a practical way. So in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Samo Dhammas Tapasal Cham Shantir Arjavameva Cha Jnana Vijnana Astikam Brahma Karma Sabhavajam. So the Brahman operates from that Vijnana platform. What is that? Vijnana can also mean wisdom, knowledge by practical application. Just like they say in the mundane world, whatever you learn, you should teach it within 24 to 48 hours. You should share it. Then it becomes ingrained, it becomes wisdom. You know these things. When you are explaining Krishna consciousness from the platform of what you know, and that knowing means what you have experienced, it has much more impact. When you're trying to get people to adopt Krishna consciousness or to become interested in Krishna consciousness, if you've experienced, it's like, say, chanting Hare Krishna, you should be able to explain the impact it's had on your life. So you can let someone else know how this chanting can impact you or how it can improve your lives. So all these things taken together means remembering Krishna in the course of our daily activity, the course of our life, by remembering Krishna, as Queen Kunti said, because she was subjected to so much suffering. Her sons were subjected to suffering. It was a very painful situation for them. I've always said that, like any mother, like say Vinjavalia, I see your wonderful Mataji, and she has so many children, like Shobha Radhe, like that. But if your child is being tortured or someone is trying to cause pain for your child, you become concerned. So in that way, I've sort of lost what I was going to say, but in that way that, can someone help me? I just lost the train of thought on that. Drona? I was trying to make a point.
You're talking about having very nice children. If your children, you mentioned how Mother, Vinjavali has very, wonderful children there. Is that the point you were looking?
It was something like that, but maybe it'll come back. See, that proves right there Krishna is the source of remembrance and forgetfulness. So I'm remembering that Krishna made me forget. But anyway, we have to constantly keep these things in perspective so that we can always remember Krishna, so that even though it's difficult in this material world, we can transcend by the grace of the Lord. And that's a constant endeavor on our part, which is my main point today, is that by Krishna's arrangement only can we attain release from the clutches of Maya. And Srila Prabhupada makes that point also in several places. Only by the mercy of the Lord, because all of this is under his control. Krishna has arranged all of this. And if we humbly practice Krishna consciousness throughout our lives, Krishna will protect us. Krishna will give us the ability to see through his material energy, his Maya, as that verse is saying. The one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. That level of Brahman, and Srila Prabhupada explains that one has to be on that level, which means in the quality of Krishna. We don't try to become Krishna, but we try to attain those qualities. We already have them. They're already part of us as spirit souls, but being in this nitya bhada condition, which means eternally conditioned souls, we're trying to get back to our normal Krishna conscious position. So Krishna is helping us through his material energy by giving us so many tests, causing us to remember. Just like I said about Queen Kunti, that even though there was so much suffering for her family, that's the point I was actually trying to make. See, Krishna brought it back. So the point is, she said, let the suffering happen again and again and again. Who would say that? Vinjavali, would you say that? Let the suffering with my daughter and my family, let it happen again. No. But Queen Kunti said it. Why? And then she gave the conclusion. She said, because when suffering, I'm forced to remember you. I'm forced to remember you. See, generally we become a little comfortable in our lives sometimes. So we have our material arrangements and so many things, and we've accomplished so many things. We become a little bit complacent, even as devotees. So Queen Kunti is saying, let the suffering happen, because it's forcing me to remember you. And most devotees can attest to this fact that when we're put into some difficulty, if we've been practicing, as I said from the beginning, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, we've been practicing nicely on a regular basis. Then when I'm put into suffering, I try to remember Krishna. There's one couple here in Atlanta, elderly Gujarati couple, both initiated at this point. They were very successful in their hotel business. And I remember they bought this beautiful brand new black Mercedes. I remember the day they drove it to the temple. So this one year, during the winter in Atlanta, it became very cold and icy. And they were driving back from their hotel that day. Now, they've been chanting Hare Krishna 16 rounds a day for many years. This particular day, Krishna had a plan. He had beautiful black, I'm not saying he was overly proud, but he was a little proud of that new car. Who wouldn't be? Beautiful black Mercedes, brand new. So they were driving back on the icy road and they had an accident and the car flipped over 3 or 4 times. And they told me with tears in their eyes that Balabhadra Prabhu, we were just chanting Hare Krishna so loud, chanting Hare Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna. That's all we could think of. And I was so proud of them. That in that much suffering, when your life could have been taken away, your security blanket, this beautiful car is being destroyed, you chose to think of Krishna. That inspired me to this day. So that is the main point, is that Krishna has arranged this material world. And I said, this perfect example of the prison house. The prison house is set up by the government perfectly, has all the arrangements for your maintenance, everything is there. And if you just cooperate, maybe, just maybe, you might get a pardon, early release. No, just like if the president, normally in the presidents, like President of the United States, especially toward the end of their term, they can release so many prisoners. They give pardons to so many people who deserve to be in jail. But by the mercy of the president, boom, they come out. So by the mercy of Krishna, we can be released in a second, as it said. At once transcends the modes of material nature. It doesn't have to take 50 years or 60 or 100 years. It can happen within a few years, like our dear saint in ISKCON, Jayananda Das Thakur. It wasn't 20 years or 30 years or 40 or 50 years of service to Srila Prabhupada. I don't remember exactly. It was something like 10 or 12 years. And Prabhupada confirmed that he went back to Godhead, That's why we call him Jayananda Das Thakur. So by his sincere service to Srila Prabhupada in this movement, of course, to the Rath Yatra. So let's meditate upon that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this is his arrangement, starting with his own manifestation and all the expansions from him, all the way to the super soul and the living entities. We're all part of Krishna. And everything in this material world is meant for our purification so that we can go back home, back to Godhead and get out of this prison house. But you can only get out of the prison house of the material world by the grace of the Lord. We should always remember that. So I'll stop there. Do we have any comments or questions? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Balabhadra Prabhu. Any of the devotees have any questions? Raise your hand virtually. Type it in the chat, however you prefer.
Hare Krishna, Balabhadra Prabhu. Thank you so much for giving class this morning.
Haribo,
As usual, very wonderful, reflective, informative, and devotionally based class. My reflection and I guess question is, in the three modes of material nature, there's, goodness, passion, and ignorance. There can be a multitude of aspects or ways that we are covered in more than one at a time, which, one can be in the mode of goodness and passion. You're getting things done, but, your heart's in the right place.
Right.
Or in the mode of goodness and ignorance. This is, in my understanding, it's something that, because it's stated in these three ways, there's not generally a look at the combination that can result. Right. And it's a tripping point for those in the mode of, who think they're in the mode of goodness, because you're just, as we do, we want to see the good. We're told to see the good. But if we're not understanding or noticing the things that are not reflective of bhakti on a conscious level, it can be a tripping point. And then that in 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the demoniac species, demoniac nature, there are some aspects or attributes of the mode of goodness that reflect what's happening with the demoniac nature. So It's a little tricky. So your insight into being attentive of what one is thinking and how the operations are going or how one is doing things in regard to this process is really insightful and a really helpful tool. And I wanted to say how much I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mitraban. Appreciate that from you. It reminds me of a lecture that Hridayananda Maharaj, His Holiness Hridayananda Maharaj gave many years ago. And the title of the lecture, because we used to make these cassettes and they put the title on the cassettes. Ancient, right? Cassettes. So one title is How the Modes Rule Our Day. And he's very, very, he can explain things in such depth. So he explained exactly what you're saying, Mitravinda, how different parts of the day, these different modes come into play into our lives as devotees, not just for the materialistic people. Until we come to that stage, that mamchayo bhyabhicharena, engaging in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, then we transcend these modes. Have we all transcended these modes? Some parts of the day we do, some parts of the day we're affected by passion, some parts of the day we're affected by ignorance. Ignorance means laziness and sleep, too much sleep, indolence, passion, too much, endeavor. And then goodness, we become too happy and, satisfied with our own whatever, consciousness and this and that. So the modes are coming in and out, coming, as you're saying, coming in and out. And we have to be very attentive to pay attention when and how they're affecting us. Am I being affected by the mode of ignorance? Am I being affected by the mode of passion, or even the mode of goodness? Because we have to transcend the modes, all of them, even goodness. I remember once when I was a young devotee of Bhakta, there was this 2 Bhaktas, one male, one female, and they were talking one day, and the one person said, you know what, I think I was born in the mode of goodness. The other one said, you know, you're right, I think I was born in the mode of goodness. And I looked at both of them and said, you guys just came from being hippies. What are you talking about? You were just taking drugs a few weeks ago. But they became so enchanted by the idea of Krishna consciousness, but not understanding how much endeavor it takes to be Krishna conscious, how much practice, the longevity of your practice, the intensity of your practice. And finally, they understood at a point. But we have to be, like they say, like a hawk. We have to pay attention to how the modes are trying to pull me this way, pull me that way, and then come back. And to be able to do that effectively every day, to do it every day, pull yourself back, because Krishna says, wherever the mind wanders, pull it back. But in order to do that, we have to, flex our muscles, lift some transcendental weights of Krishna consciousness, like read these books, hear from devotees, study scrutinizingly to the limit of your capacity as a person, really try to understand what Srila Prabhupada has presented. And then we can be more effective in dealing with the modes of material nature, because Daiviyesha Gunamai, it's divine energy. I mean, like you're trying to break out of the prison. Are you crazy? It's the government. It's the government right there. And you want to break out. So you, as a devotee, you think, I'm just going to do it. Not without Krishna's mercy, because the energy itself, goodness, passion, ignorance, is divine. That verse proves it. And it's under Krishna's control. Mayat yakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. All this is working under Krishna's control. How are we going to get free from, like you said, the ignorance and the passion? We can't by our own endeavor, but we can by the grace of the Lord. So thank you for that comment. Anyone else?
Balabaji Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you so much for a wonderful class. The analogy you were giving about the different types of prisoners that come out, and you were even saying how there were those that are on that get early parole, and some of it's just complete mercy, like a president just pardons somebody.
Yeah.
Political favor, whatever it may be, in the political world. But so comparing that to, I guess, my understanding is there's different types of devotees. There's the different siddhas. There's the sadhana siddha, the kripa siddha, and then I guess the nitya siddha. How would that compared to, I guess, into this analogy of the different types of prisoners?
No, you actually explained it very nicely. So the sadhana siddha, he's practicing and he becomes perfect by sincere practice. Nitya siddha is already liberated. And the kripa siddha, like you just said, the president came and gave you a pardon by some great mercy. Brahmanda Brahmite Kaun Bhagyavan Jeev. Guru Krishna Prasari Pai Bhakti Lata Beach. So by the grace of Guru and Krishna, you get this Bhakti Lata. And then that Bhakti Lata gets watered by hearing and chanting and association. Such mercy. Do we deserve it? It's called causeless mercy. That Kripa Siddha, causeless mercy by the grace of Guru and Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's coming to America and blessing so many devotees, so many conditioned souls before they became engaged in devotional service is totally Kripa Siddha. If someone thinks, I'm a Nitya Siddha, I was perfect anyway. No. No. And sadhana siddha, what sadhana was going on in America before Prabhupada came? Was there any sadhana? No, you had Allen Ginsberg, he had went to India, he knew about Hare Krishna. Was it sadhana? Not necessarily, not really. None of them. There was no sadhana, spiritual bhakti devotional sadhana. Maybe there was some sadhana because people did yoga and they did some regular practice, but we're talking about bhakti yoga, that kind of sadhana. No, it was not going on. So we were engaged by Srila Prabhupada from the Kripa Siddha platform, and we were brought into the sadhana siddha. How do we confirm that? What does it say? Adao Shraddha Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya. The whole process, it's like, it's a package. Adao, Prabhupada says, having some faith, Adao Shraddha, and enough faith to hear from a devotee. The guy's offering you a book, and you have enough faith to take it. Like when I got my first book from Vaishnavananda Bhakta Bill, I had enough faith to give him my last remaining money in my pocket, which was my bus fare to get home from work. I had enough faith that I wanted this so badly that I gave him that, and I had no idea how I was going to get home that day, but I had enough faith. You know what? Probably that little faith, exhibition of faith, brought me to this movement, kept me here for all those years. Just that one little act of Adao Shraddha, and then Sadhu Sangha. Then I started associating with devotees, and then Bhajana Kriya. Then they gave me some sadhana, some practice. In those days, I don't know if maybe Vishnu Gada can identify with this. You had to string your own beads, because at least in Atlanta, we hadn't bought any beads from India. So you had to go to the place, buy your beads, string them up. It took a lot of work, a lot of faith. But the devotees were encouraging you. Sadhana, sadhu sangha. So to your point, Drona, that Kripa Siddha, that's where we mostly all came from, by the mercy of a devotee. We hadn't even met Srila Prabhupada. And all of you who are not disciples of Srila Prabhupada, you didn't meet Srila Prabhupada. You didn't have that opportunity, but you're meeting Srila Prabhupada through his books. He said, of the two, Vani and Vapu, which is more important? Vani, because that will go on. The Vapu, he said, it will be gone. He said, the body will be gone. But these words, and he even said, even if the movement somehow doesn't make it, he said, doesn't matter because the brainwashed books are already there. He called it himself. These brainwashed books are already there. Somebody's going to start following this Vani. So that is the mercy, Kripa Siddha. So I would say, with a certain amount of confidence, that most of us came due to that Kripa Siddha. And then we were engaged in sadhana. And hopefully, this is like you're on the ground, and then you get on the plane, and then the plane goes up into the sky. So by that process, you go up, and then you start flying. So here we are, Nitya Badas, we've got some mercy, we're practicing devotional service. Do we become Nitya Siddha? Is it that we become Nitya Siddha? Maybe Vishnu Gada, if you don't mind, if you're going to do it, can you maybe talk a little bit about the Nitya Siddha and how a devotee can become, or is a devotee always Nitya Siddha and then somehow covered? That difference between the Nitya Siddha and the Kripa Siddha, that's subtle difference.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol Prabhu.
Well, I mean, my understanding is, and I've checked it out with a few devotees and they concur, but the word Nitya can have different meanings. So generally we accept Nitya as being eternal, always existing in the past and always existing in the present and the future, right?
Yes.
But in the description of Srimad Bhagavatam of Narad Muni, he becomes a Nitya Siddha. So how is it? I mean, if we have the other definition that it was always there in the past, it doesn't seem correct. So another meaning of Nitya would be from then on. You follow?
Yes.
He's not going to fall down ever. He's become an eternal associate of the Lord. In that way, he's a Nitya Siddha. In other cases, you find, different devotees doing austerities and then becoming Nitya Siddha. So the definition of Nitya in that case means from then on.
Excellent. That's beautiful. Just like that example, there's planes flying in the sky, you're on the ground, you come up and you start flying equally to them. Or Prabhupada used another example, like the car is going at a certain speed and you're walking or riding a bike at a certain speed. If you grab hold of the car, you go at the same speed. So once we get free from all this illusion and attachment and Maya, and we get situated in our, what is Sarup Siddhi, in our eternal form, as Vishnu Guru is saying, from that point forward. Because eternity, I have to admit to you all, I still don't quite understand eternity. It is perplexing. Natweva ham jatuna samaham neme janadipa. Never was there a time when we did not exist. So did we exist? Were we born in Maya? We were never born. We're eternal. And we're Satchitananda. We're just in this material world temporarily, and it's our beautiful nature is covered by this divine energy. Can you imagine? I mean, how powerful is the material energy, which is Krishna's manifestation, when we ourselves are divine, 10,000 times brighter, more powerful than the sun. This energy must be amazing to control us the way it is. So therefore, we're eternally servants of Krishna, temporarily distracted by material nature, which is also Krishna, controlled by Krishna. We just have to remember, by the grace of Guru, Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjanan Salakaya. The spiritual master opens our eyes, which were closed by the darkness of ignorance. And then we start to see, oh, yes, Krishna is everywhere. And then we never forget him. He says, I'm never lost to my devotees, never. And neither are they lost to me. So those are the meditations that we have to take with us. And then we again become, as Vishnu Gadas pointed out, Nitya Siddha from this point forward. That's sweet. That's very beautiful. So we can be Nitya Siddha from this point forward, instead of Nitya Bhada forever and ever and ever, eternally conditioned. So when you say eternally conditioned, wait a minute, there's no chance for me to become liberated again? So then what does it mean eternally conditioned? Up to the point that you become liberated again. Wow. Anything else?
If there are no more questions, we can conclude here. Our gratitude to you, Balabhadra Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
For sharing with us today. We'd like to announce that tonight we have our Bhagavad Gita Shloka class starting at 6:40. And if you're interested in learning the proper pronunciations, how to memorize verses, both the Sanskrit and the English, please take advantage of this class. It's only 20 minutes. So, please come and check it out if you haven't already. And then at 7 o'clock, we have our Srila Prabhupada Leela night. We read and study about the wonderful activities of Srila Prabhupada and his starting of the Hare Krishna movement, directly through the writings of his very close disciples that lived with him during that time. Tomorrow morning, we'll have Srimad Bhagavatam class by Navina Nirada Prabhu. So we look forward to seeing you at that point as well. Everybody have a wonderful Krishna conscious day. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Vanchakalpatarubhascha kripasindu evacha patitanam
Bhavanebhyo
Vaishnavibhyo. Haribo, Haribo.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Haribo.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.